Welcome, friends. So today we're going to take a break from the American Civil War. As much as it's one of my favorite subjects, this is a general history channel. We cover all subjects and all eras. So today we'll be moving to a new era and a new place. My favorite continent to learn about, Africa. Today we'll be learning about two brothers who stalled an empire, the Tsavo Man-Eaters. As always, if you're a new viewer, I hope I can earn your subscription. And for all returning viewers, please like, share, and comment. Now let's get into the ghost and the darkness. Now, the scramble of Africa was pretty much decided at the Berlin Conference of 1884, and the territory of Kenya and Uganda were firmly in British hands. The British, having abolished slavery in England, had not yet done it in their colonies, but were in the late 1800s doing everything, especially following the American Civil War, to ban it in their colonies. Now, Africa was difficult because their colonies were all spread out, but they decided on how to stop it. The local tribes who were conducting slavery could only be stopped by the military viceroys and their troops. But if there were tribal issues in Uganda and the army was in Kenya towards East Africa, it would take weeks for them to march through the plains and jungles of Africa. So the British government began to establish rail companies throughout their new colonies, one of the first being the Kenya-Uganda Railway. It would help not only moving exports out towards the Suez Canal and Indian Ocean, but also help the viceroys end slavery and keep the peace. Now we come upon a place called Tsavo. Tsavo was an important location on the Arabian slave trade, and Tsavo had, in a way, become a dumping ground for dead slaves. A common tactic the Arab traders would do is chain two people together, and if one died, they would wound the other and move on and allow the wildlife to claim the two people. The Kamba and Wada people, a Swahili-speaking members of the Bantu people, came to call it Tsavo, Swahili for a place of slaughter, between the slave trade and the territorial wars between the Kamba and Wadas. They believed it to be cursed with evil spirits, to the point that they would not even try to settle the land. Tsavo, however, rested directly near the Kenyan-Uganda border, so the rail company had their line going directly through it and the Tsavo River. So they began to build tracks using locals originally to help build. But the British then decided to bring in Indian workers, commonly known as coolies, for they were more experienced at large construction projects. Also, the natives refused to work at Tsavo for fear of the demons. Now we arrive at the port of Mombasa in 1898, where an Irish colonel in the British Army arrived to take command of the overall logistics and efficiency of the railroad. His name was John Henry Patterson. Contrary to popular belief, he was not in fact an engineer. He was more of a logistical whiz. He had been chosen to be sure the railroad was on schedule, and after 10 days of helping the administration in Mombasa, he was sent to take personal command of the construction site at Tsavo and bring one of the new surgeons, Dr. Rose, with him. The first week in Tsavo, workers began to go missing, many stating demons or devils were taking them. Patterson originally initially ignored them, believing it was people killing one another, because a lot of the times what would happen is they would pay the coolies with silver or gold, and what the coolies would do is they would actually have rings and necklace made just so they could have their payment on them. So he thought that they were being murdered by their fellow workers so they can get the payment from them. But everything changed when a man named Singh went missing. Singh was actually a member of the Indian caste of the Jemadar, a form of Indian knight. Singh had become a calming presence to Patterson, a source of order, but the coolies that shared his tent witnessed a lion, who they believed was a female, pulling the Jemadar into the darkness. Patterson began to, at night, stay up to hunt the beast, but every night he would hear the screams of the coolies as each night the lions would attack. Finally, he decided to build an African-style fence known as boma, large thorn fences in a hope to ward off the lions from attacking. However, the attacks would continue, but they would suddenly stop randomly. Construction would slowly begin again. So much was done that they finally split the camp, so half would stay building the rail line, about 5,000 people, and then the other half, about 3,000, would go build the bridge across the Tsavo River, some 7 miles apart from each other. Patterson would order a second boma and hospital built. That night, however, the lions would begin their attacks again. It's at this point they would finally realize that they were 2 male lions. 2 rogue lions without manes. Now, there's many theories on why they were so aggressive and maneless. First being they may have had an overdose of testosterone, which made them hostile and caused them to lose their manes, and caused them to be prideless because they were too violent. The next was they were the runts of litters, and to survive they allied together. And because of the heavy thorn bushes that littered the plains of Tsavo, they had lost their manes. And because of the Arab slave trade, they had become accustomed to the flesh of men. The local Wada and Kamba people had their own ideas. They believed that they were the spirits of shaman who came back to kill the white men for seizing Africa. To the coolies, they were simply hell and evil. One night, however, the 2 lions attacked the camp, but the coolies worked up enough courage that they fought back, trying to save their friend. They threw rocks, knives, and some of the jemadars arrived to shoot them, but it was all in vain. The lions would jump the walls, and the men would only hear their friend get torn apart by the lions. The attacks were now making the coolies, who were just employees, they weren't required to be there, begin to quit, deciding to return to India. But Patterson believed he had figured out a way to catch the man-eaters. Early one morning, the lions attacked a coolie. The coolie was carrying supplies between the 2 camps. The man got away, but the goats did not survive. Patterson thought he had an advantage, so he and the camp doctor set a trap. The 2 of them would spend the night in a wagon with another wagon over them, making what looked like a pillbox and leaving a pack of goats in front of them as bait. This is when they realized how intelligent these lions were. While one ran past the box, causing the men to open fire, the other jumped on top of the wagon and began to scratch the top. Not enough to get in, but enough to make sure that the 2 men would not go to sleep. And because the men were laying down, they couldn't angle their rifles up to shoot up. So in the morning, a realization came that they were taunting the 2 men. Paw prints were becoming very constant in the campsite as the death increased. Finally, the work came to a crashing halt. The district office lead, Mr. Whitehouse, actually came to Tsavo, but as he got off the train, he was attacked, and 2 lions killed his sergeant, Abdullah. Something more alarming had begun. Patterson was having nightmares, but he lived in the citadel of the boma walls. One morning, he noticed something on the boards of his tent. Claw marks. Claw marks that were not there before he went to sleep. The lions had actually been entering the camp at night and entering the tent while Patterson was sleeping, but they decided not to kill him. After a few more attempts to kill the lions, including successfully trapping one with sepoy soldiers, none of them successfully killed the lions, and the workers fled. After months of no success, on December 9th, 1898, Patterson killed the first lion, with the assistance of the sepoys. Then on the 29th, he killed the second lion. He actually wounded the first one, and then it returned later that day in hopes to kill Patterson. But the leg wound had hindered the lion's speed, making it, finally, Patterson's victim. The second lion was actually wounded about 7 to 9 times while stalking Patterson as well. Severely wounded, the lion then tried to return to its lair, but the soldiers and Patterson caught up and finished off the beast. Patterson would go on to say, even though it was dying, the lion used whatever strength it had left to try to kill Patterson. The incident had hindered the construction so much that Lord Salisbury, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, had to make a statement to the House of Lords, and that statement was the following: the whole of the works were put to a stop, because a pair of man-eating lions appeared in the locality and conceived a most unfortunate taste for our workmen. At last, laborers declined to carry on unless they were guarded by iron entrenchments. Of course, it is difficult to work a railway under these conditions, and until we found an enthusiastic sportsman to get rid of these lions, our enterprise was seriously hindered. Patterson would finish the bridge and the railroad, and then he would go on to command the Jewish Legion in World War I and be named the godfather of the Israeli Defense Force. He had retired to Bel Air, California, where he would die on June 18th, 1947. He had kept the two lions with him until his death as rugs. His son Brian Patterson was a known paleontologist at the Chicago Field Museum. So after his father's death, he donated the skins and skull to the Chicago Field Museum, where they remain today. In 2001, the museum wanted to do some studies on the lions in an attempt to figure out if what Patterson stated in his memoirs was true. They debated the record had shown only about 20 to 40 confirmed kills by the lions, but did not put in effect the locals and other groups that were not on the government rosters, or even the wounded who died later from their wounds. So, that first test did not actually disprove Patterson's estimate of over hundreds of casualties. Next test done was on the diets of the animals. The longest standing legend was that the lions had not been eating, but killing and torturing their victims for sport. So doing the test, researchers were able to figure that they had been commonly ingesting herbivores, not many carnivores or omnivores. So this kind of didn't disprove Patterson, but the reality was many victims were Hindi, who had very vegetarian diets. So it wouldn't be impossible to make the connection, but this also brings us to men like Singh, the Jemidar. Many Jemidars were of Islamic faith, and Singh himself was. He received an Islamic funeral by the workers after his death. So this, among other workers who were Muslims, in a way, doesn't support the idea that all the men killed were, in fact, eaten. There's also the story of the lair. Now, lions usually don't have lairs. They usually have dens, but lions are mostly nomadic. They follow their prey as the prey moves. Patterson reported that he found deep in the hills around Tsavo a cavern filled with the skeletal remains of the Bantu people. He could tell by the jewelry on their bodies that they were Bantu. He estimated the skeletons in the hundreds. Again, the Bantu, much like Muslims, had an omnivore diet. So the test couldn't disprove these claims at all. In a strange way, if they only found herbivore in the diet, it kind of proved that they were hunting other animals for food and killing the humans for sport. The man-eaters in local folklore have remained demons whom some tribes believe are not dead, but still haunt Tsavo, looking for their next kill. They believe all Patterson did was release them from their mortal bonds. In the end, we still don't know what made them so hostile. What made them hunt for sport. Maybe the natives were right. It was the imperialist punishment for trying to conquer the world. This incident is immortalized in Patterson's memoirs, The Man-Eaters of Tsavo. Also, the 1996 film adapted from his memoirs called The Ghost in the Darkness, starring Val Kilmer as Patterson and co-starring Michael Douglas. Thanks for watching, friends. Hope we enjoyed this episode, changing things up a bit. The Man-Eaters of Tsavo, I think, are a fascinating story. Ghost in the Darkness is actually, I would say, in my top 5 favorite movies of all time, even though it's grossly inaccurate to the actual book. But it's great. The book actually was written, the foreword of the book is written by Theodore Roosevelt. He was so fascinated by the story that after everything was settled, he actually went to Africa to visit Tsavo. But again, thank you so much for viewing. If you're a new viewer, please, I hope I earned your subscription. For our regular viewers, please like, share, and comment. And we'll see you in the next one.